Hello, here we are again.
Again.
It's I don't know what day it is. Tuesday?
What day is it? Technically Tuesday. Yeah, it is
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Okay. It's been another busy day.
Mm.
Would you like to tell us, Evelyn, what you've been up to today?
Well, indeed. Well, this morning both of us went to different policy forum seminars. Is that the way around? Yeah,
Mm.
which were really interesting. So the one I went to was on housing, and which inevitably linked up with transport. So it was very interesting. So we had Andy MacDonald, who's the Labour Shadow Minister for Transport, and who do we have? John Trickett, Housing, and Andrew Gwynn. Yeah. Anyway, it was really, really interesting actually. So it was very much about Labour's plans for building more and more houses, and especially about things like community-led development rather than housing developments run by big business, by the housing developers. So it's really radical, and it was very much concerned with the transport links as well, of course. So that led on to discussion of trains and buses and what was needed. So it was a really wide-ranging seminar, actually, fascinating, and very hopeful for this country, because obviously so much needs to be built and rebuilt. Oh, there's something that's come out called Housing for the Many. That's a new booklet you can get from Labour explaining their latest policies.
Right. Well, I went to, at the same time, a seminar on education policy, and I arrived a few minutes after it started, so I can't actually tell you who was on the stage, but it's whoever the person is responsible for early years education, and the person responsible for mainstream schools, and the person responsible for FE. So they were all there. Again, it was a lively debate. Clearly, and I think I said this yesterday, the new Labour education policy looks really exciting for people who are interested in education, as we all should be, because children are important to all our futures, and it involves clearly the sort of things you would expect, such as reinstating a lot of the Sure Start programme, free nursery places for everybody. I think the main thing that we focused on was looking at replacing the what's it called now, the current teacher training programme, Just Teach or whatever it's called, with a proper 3-year course once again that requires teachers to be university trained. We also looked at the policy which is to bring all the academy schools back into the state sector, fully into the state sector. Some debate over how and when that's going to happen. Clearly, state schools that run into difficulties, academies that run into difficulties could be brought straight back into the state sector. Those that are being slightly more successful, we're not sure how that's going to happen yet. And there was also some discussion of Ofsted and SATs and all the things you would expect, but by and large I'd have to say that there's a lot of detail, but that the new education policy looks like it's going to be really exciting. And then we went along to the main
event
hall, the main debating chamber once again,
Yeah.
And the day started with, what did the day start with?
Just thinking
Trying to
about
remember, it's a long time ago.
Let me see. We had some major speeches today,
Mm.
so but we also had quite a lot of voting to do, didn't we? Mainly show of hands
Yeah,
voting.
and when there were a lot of speakers from the floor, which
Yes.
takes up quite a lot of time, and is a bit random really, I'd have to say, because you'd have 2 or 3 motions presented, and then people would stand up from the floor and go to speak at the front on any of them. So there was no sort of sequence to what people decided to talk about. So the big event of the day was obviously, and I'm sure you'll have caught up with this on the news, was Keir Starmer's speech about the Brexit motion that finally came out of the compositing meeting that we both went to, which passed easily. There were a few people voted against, but very, very few, relatively speaking. Keir Starmer gave a very good speech. Obviously, it was a controversial sort of day because John McDonnell had seemed to, early in the day, say that a referendum, a second referendum or a third referendum, another referendum was off the table, and Keir Starmer clearly put it back on the table in his speech, and seems to have really clarified Labour Party policy, and it was a very popular speech. He got standing ovations several times, and lots of cheering when the motion was passed as well. So I think that was good news, and we were all part of that in having put in a motion of our own. There was also various union motions, mostly about privatisation and halting all further privatisation of public services. There was a motion about cladding, which related to the Grenfell fire, immediately removing all cladding from buildings which had non-fire retardant cladding. There was a lively debate about Palestine as well.
Well, I don't know if you saw it, but it was quite amazing, wasn't it? Because at some point people unfurled their Palestinian flags, and it was quite amazing, really, to see that array of support for Palestine in that fashion. It's a very passionate debate and pretty united, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
So that was very moving, very moving. As was the Windrush debate.
And there was also a Windrush debate,
that was
yes.
Very interesting. But we also had other speeches, didn't we? So we had Emily Thornberry.
We had Emily Thornberry, who gave a rousing speech, I think it's fair to say. I mean, I'm not sure what the content was exactly, but it certainly got the audience on their feet, cheering and clapping and shouting. It was more a rousing of the troops than it was. It didn't have any policy content at all, really.
No. But it was interesting, wasn't it, the way she came out so strongly, the anti-fascist stance, for
absolutely,
instance.
Absolutely. And I have to say, I mean, she gave a really good speech. Good speaker, very good speaker, very, very compelling, very charismatic speaker. Really good speech. Certainly the best speech of the day, although much less content than most of the others, probably. No policy content, really. And there was Diane Abbott as well.
Diane Abbott, towards the end of the day. Again, she got a lot of support from the hall. It was very interesting, because obviously she's been through such a lot and so on recently. So that was really quite stirring. And immigration policy, and I think she was interviewed on Newsnight a bit later about that. But again, very positive, and there was nothing that new, I don't think, was it? Just clarifying Labour's policies. So it was quite a day for speeches, wasn't it?
Absolutely, lots of major speeches. We ran into Nathan, and we ran into Lynn. We had been hoping to get Lynn to speak a few words to camera, but it's actually quite difficult to find anywhere quiet enough to do that at conference. So we may try again tomorrow when we've actually finished conference and are on our way home. Tomorrow's only a half day, and the big event of the day is the Jeremy Corbyn speech, obviously, and after which we head back for home, really. But the other thing we did do today was we went to another event after the close of conference. We went to a what now, how do we cope with disastrous Tory Brexit meeting, basically, at which were several of the people who've been movers and shakers in the behind the scenes debate on the left of the party about how to avoid Brexit, I guess, and what strategy to take. So it was about what to do next, really, and I think the consensus was we need to start developing links with other socialist parties in other countries and coming up with some common policies about ways in which the EU can be reformed, because we're all saying, well, Remain and reform is the way we want to go, but then we do have to specify what sort of reforms we want and who else is going to be working with us in the struggle for those. So that was fascinating, meeting. As usual, as we wandered around, we saw lots of people. The person that I've been most struck by, really, is Dennis Skinner, because you can't go to Labour conference without running into Dennis Skinner. And I have a theory that actually all he's doing is walking round and round the conference site all day long, because we've seen him every day more than once, and he just wanders slowly round with this sort of coterie of acolytes, and people stop and take selfies with him, and it seems to be his main function, really, at conference.
Yes, he hasn't spoken from the stage, has he?
He hasn't. Oh, Alf Dubs was on stage as well.
Alf Dubs, that was very interesting, very moving, wasn't it? Yeah. Again, of course, on child refugees in general. Yeah, he's always very passionate and really gets through.
Passionate, obviously a very humane and humorous man, really. He was a good sense of humour.
Yes, he was actually, wasn't he? It's such a serious subject, but he managed to sort of interject it with humanity and humour, which was lovely. I thought, actually, interestingly, last year we had Naomi Klein being our sort of international guest. But we haven't, have we, this year?
There hasn't been one. No.
I think they wanted to give more time for delegates.
Well, I think that the plan was to have more opportunity for speakers from the floor. So every debate there's been 30, 40, 45 speakers from the floor. A very mixed quality, I have to say, if I'm honest. Some really, really clear, really good. Others, they get up and they make a speech and you're left thinking, well, I wonder which motion they were actually speaking to, because they seem to have written themselves a script and they're going to deliver it come hell or high water, whatever the subject that's actually under discussion is. So you're left none the wiser, really, by some.
There's quite a lot of talk about changing that system if possible, wasn't it? Because people, it was very difficult. So many people want to speak, and even the more, there's no end to it really. So they were considering, well, the members, the delegates, suggesting some other form. I don't know, names in a hat or somehow sorting that out, because it can be a bit contentious.
Well, maybe pre-selecting speakers at the beginning of the day before.
Well,
Because it's, even though this year they've banned elephants and donkeys and inflatable animals and other props.
Couldn't use the Totnes unicorn.
Nevertheless, some people seem to be better at making themselves seen than others, and some people can keep their hand in the air for hours and other people can't. Personally, I think I must have had my hand in the air for at least 2 or 3 hours of today, and never once got called to speak. Really, well, that's not entirely fair. I did in a meeting this evening, but not in the policy forum or during the main debate on the conference floor. But there we go. Yeah. So Jeremy Corbyn to look forward to tomorrow, and there's some others. John Ashworth, I think, in the morning.
Oh yes, and Dawn Butler. Well, hasn't spoken to the main conference yet, has she? Though she was, of course, at Women's Conference. So that'll be interesting. Yeah. To see the tone that Jeremy takes tomorrow morning.
Yep.
Interesting.
Indeed.
So, action-packed time.
Absolutely. And I think that's about it for today's bulletin. We're hoping it's a bit shorter than yesterday's, because we're told that yesterday's ran to about 10 minutes, which was probably a bit long, but hopefully tonight's is shorter. So we'll wish you all good night and speak to you again tomorrow.